Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Jason Buckingham. I'm the Practice Director for Dynamics GP here at Turnkey Technologies. With me is Ann Diaz, Practice Director for Dynamics 365 Business Central. And today we're going to be walking you guys through some of the similarities between Dynamics GP and Dynamics 365 Business Central in the Financials module. So we'll be walking through a specific agenda. And I'll be sharing just some screenshots about how we do things in GP, how we set some things up, and how we process some transactions. And then Ann will be taking that same information set and be demoing live in Business Central to walk us through how it's similar to Dynamics GP, right? It's just to bring some familiarity between the two products because we are getting a lot of questions about the two products and what's similar and what's different between them. So our agenda today is, again, we'll be doing the financials comparison from GP to Business Central. We'll be talking about the general ledger. We'll be talking about cash and bank. We'll be talking about accounts payable, and then we'll also be talking about accounts receivable. So starting off with the general ledger, we'll jump into chart of accounts, we'll talk about journal entries, and we'll talk about financial reporting in Dynamics GP first. So when we talk about setting up Dynamics GP and setting up that chart of accounts, most of us are familiar with the account format setup, which is a company-based setup window that you can configure what your chart of accounts is going to look like in Dynamics GP. Now you are establishing a maximum account length and a maximum number of segments when you install Dynamics GP, and that kind of locks those fields down and limits your ability to expand your chart of accounts up to that maximum account length and maximum segment lengths. When we move down into the red words that say account length and account segments, that's telling the system that's what the account length is going to be in Dynamics GP and the number of segments you plan on using in your chart of accounts. So as you can see, GP uses a segmented based chart of accounts structure. Okay. In my company, as you can see here, I have 3 segments. Each of those segments represent a different reporting unit or different dimension, to say, in my chart of accounts. And the length of my account number is going to be 9. Okay, so when I go through and set this up, I have to have 3 segments, and the total length of those segments has to equal 9. In my chart of accounts, I have 3 segments. The first one is division, right? And that's 3 characters long. Then I have account number, which is my natural account number. And then I have a department, which division and department are my reporting units. I want to see my income by division. I want to see expenses by department. This is what's going to allow me to do those. Okay. And then we define what that main segment ID is. And as I mentioned before, my natural account segment is going to be my second segment, which is my account number. I can do things like separate with. I can separate each of the segments with a dash, a star, or whatever character I really wanted to use. By default, it's just a dash in that. Okay. Our next step in setting up our chart of accounts will be, once we've defined what our segments are in our chart of accounts, we have to go through and define, well, we don't have to, but we should go through and define what are all the segments we are going to use and what are the descriptions of those segments. Again, this is all based for financial reporting. So you can see in my example on the right, I can go to my account segment setup window. I can select the segment ID I want to define. And then in the left, you can see I have a complete listing of all of the segments in my chart of account that I will be using for division. So I'll have 000, which that's just my base chart of accounts. I have 100 for my administrative accounts, 200 for the accounting team, 300 for the sales team, and so on and so forth. Okay. Now, once I've had my account format set up and I've defined my segments in the system, then I can go through and actually start building my chart of accounts in GP, and we do that through cards in the financials module through the account maintenance window. All right. In my example here, I've gone through and I've created an account number just by typing in 000 510000 and then tabbing off of that field to kind of create that account number, that master record. And then I can free type in things like the description, the alias, what account category does that belong to? Is it a profit and loss or a balance sheet type? And then what's the typical balance? If it carries a debit balance, does it show up negative or positive? So with a segmented chart of accounts with all of these different segments in my account structure, one of the, I guess, strengths and weaknesses, depending on how you look at it in GP, is that every time I have a reporting unit that I want to report on, as an example on the right of the screen, I want to report sales for our basic sales account, our general sales account, and then I also want to break out financial reporting for U.S. sales, okay, for Canadian sales, for Australian and Asian sales, and I have all of these different reporting units that I want to track and account for in my chart of accounts. What that means is I have to have a separate account number for each of those reporting units, and I need to be booking transactions to those correct account numbers for them to allow me to yield out a financial statement that makes sense and is accurate, okay? So the more reporting units you have, the longer your chart of accounts is, and as you know with GP, once you create an account number in the financials module and you post a transaction to it, it becomes very difficult to remove that account number. So I've seen, clients use account numbers and segments to manage things like projects, things that are going to end at some point in time. But once that project ends, they'll have a project segment in their chart of accounts. Once that project ends, that account number has to stay in your chart of accounts, and you always have to filter through it or filter around it or kind of manage that account number, even though the account is zero because the project is closed. There are some out-of-the-box solutions that can help you manage the size of your account, the size of your chart of accounts by using tools like analytical accounting, which is it's a large component of GP that you can set up and configure. It stores a lot of data in the database, and it gives you the ability to report off of financial dimensions, but it creates a lot of transactional overhead. So every transaction you enter, you have to define these reporting units on your accounts or these dimension codes. And so it's not an ideal solution. It does work. You also have multi-dimensional analysis, which is out of the box that you can set up different dimensions for your account numbers, and then you can define those dimension codes. The downfall of multi-dimensional analysis is that it does not flow through to Management Reporter for financial reporting. So if your requirements is to yield a financial statement by a reporting unit, multi-dimensional analysis will not give that to you, but analytical accounting will. Again, that's an add-on that it comes with GP, but you have to install it separately, okay, and configure that separately. All right. Let's move forward. When we're talking about the general ledger, we're going to talk about transaction entry. And in Dynamics GP, even though it's a fully integrated solution, it's unidirectional, meaning if I'm going to enter a transaction in accounts payable, it will communicate the distributions up to the general ledger. But if I enter a general journal entry in the general ledger, it will not communicate, even if I'm posting to an accounts payable account, it will not communicate that transaction back down to the accounts payable subledger, right? So it's unidirectional up to the chart of accounts or up to your general ledger. Transaction entry is pretty simple. You open up your general transaction entry window. Dynamics GP keeps track of your journal entry numbers. It will default those in. You can enter in your transaction date, your source document type, your reference number, your currency ID, and then you can enter in your account numbers and the debit and credit balance of those. Now, you're not limited on the number of journal entries or the number of line items you can have in your journal entry, but you are required to have matching debits and credits before you're allowed to post that transaction. Now, if you're entering in journal entries that have 20, 30, 40 line items, you might find it simpler to take advantage of Excel copy and paste. You just create your journal entries in an Excel spreadsheet, 4 columns. So the first column will be your description. Your second column is your account number. Then your third column is your debits. Your fourth column is your credits. Enter in all that information, copy it in Excel, and then you can simply click on the paste button in your journal, in your transaction entry window, and it will fill in that information for you, and you don't have to manually key that in. Okay. There is subledger control up to your general ledger in Dynamics GP, which means for each of your subledger modules, in this example, I chose the series purchasing. The origin is the payables transaction entry window. You can control how those subledgers do post up into your general ledger, whether it's directly to your general ledger, or if you want that stopping point where posting from payables transaction entry creates a batch in general ledger that you can review and post later. Okay, so there is a lot of control around whether or not subledgers post to your general ledger at all, or how they post up into your general ledger, and that's all done through your posting setup windows. As far as reporting in Dynamics GP, you have your base reporting in GP, including things like your trial balance report. You know, you can print those reports in GP. They go to a screen, a print screen window. You can only have one print screen window open at a time. So if you've ever run into that as a GP user where you printed a report, you kind of minimized it, then you try and run another report and you're waiting and waiting and waiting for that report, only to find out you already had a report open. You close it, then your next report opens. That's reporting out of GP. It's not very, it's quick, it's fast, but it has its drawbacks, is what I'm trying to say. So you can print your trial balance reports in numerous different formats in GP. You also have tools like advanced financials in GP, which is, it's kind of a, it's an older financial reporting tool that's baked into GP. You access that through GP, but it's a little bit cumbersome compared to some of the other reporting tools we have. You have Smart List that you can utilize. You have Smart List Designer, build your own Smart Lists. You have Excel refreshable reporting that comes packaged with GP, or you have the ability to create your own Excel refreshable reports. SSRS, or SQL Server Reporting Services, is another tool that's used with Dynamics GP. And again, GP comes with default reports that you can deploy and utilize those reporting tools, or you can configure them and use them yourself. And then we have Management Reporter. Now, if you're on an older version of GP, you may know Management Reporter by the name FRX. Okay, FRX was the legacy product of Management Reporter. It was a Microsoft Access-based reporting tool, where Management Reporter is a SQL-based reporting tool, and that allows you to create dynamic financial reports out of Dynamics GP. So, a really quick high-level overview, which I'm sure our audience is relatively familiar with, the general ledger account setups, the transaction entry points for the general ledger, and reporting tools in the financials module for the general ledger. I'm going to pass it over to Ann now, who's going to talk to you and show you some live demos regarding how these things match over into Business Central and what they look like. So, Ann, I'll hand it over to you.
Okay, thank you, Jason. So I'm going to go ahead and show my screen. So we're on the home page of Business Central, and I want to, there's a lot of details I could go into here, but what I want to do is stick close to the same topics that Jason showed you so that you can do some apples to apples comparison. So I'm going to just quickly mention that, let's see here, that the home screen allows me access to all of the different things based on my role center that I'm logged into. So I am logged in as the business manager role center. That gives me access to all things financial. And of course, I have access up here to my global search, so I can search for anything that I'm looking for. In this case, I'm going to search for the chart of accounts. And I have, now it's popped up different pages I can go to, as well as reports, as well as some help documentation, and even some web links. So the global search is a very important tool. I'm going to pop into the chart of accounts screen. So in the chart of accounts, you're only seeing the natural account number here. It's not segmented like what you saw in GP. What you have in Business Central is the ability to have a very streamlined chart of accounts. You just have your natural number organized by your assets, liabilities, owner's equity, revenue, and expenses, and then you use dimensions to break down your segments and tag your data. So I have, you can see also here I have several different accounts that have balances. And I can drill down in here. I will get to that later. Right now what I'm looking to show you is what the account setup options are. So you specify whether it's a balance sheet or income statement account. You can have categories for your accounts and account types. Those account types are useful when you do reporting. in the system, which I will also show you as part of this segment. And you have some posting groups that you can assign to your accounts. I mentioned that dimensions were a very key feature, a foundational part of Business Central. So I'm going to go into those next. And you would compare these to your segments in GP. So I have set up several different segments or dimensions here. I have customer group, department. I have a fixed asset sub-account, product category, and project code. These are user definable. So every user determines what their dimensions are going to be. And you have the ability to create as many as you want. You do have 2 global dimensions, which are going to default on all of your screens and reports. But you can have, again, as many dimensions as you would like to define. What you do is you use these to tag your transactions so that you can slice and dice your data on reports. For example, if I take a look at department, and I go up to dimension and look at the dimension values, here are my departments. This could also be cost center. You can have a code that is 01, 02, 03, or a descriptive word, whatever makes sense here. What this means is when I'm entering a transaction, I can associate this dimension with that transaction, and then I would be able to see on a report what transactions hit my different departments that I have defined here. You can also do this by product category, as you see here, customer group. So as an example, if I was entering in a sales order, I could associate that with a specific department, a specific customer group, and a specific product category. So for that one sales order, I could see what type of customer I sold the item to, what type of product I sold, where I sold it, and which department I'm going to record any associated expenses or revenue with. We'll see this in action as we go into a journal entry, but it is important to note that there's so many things you can do with dimensions, and I'm really just kind of scraping the surface here. Dimensions you can set as combinations so that maybe I don't want my users to have to remember which dimension to select for a expense type transaction. I want the account, the natural account, to determine what those dimensions are, so I can set up a combination, assign it to my vendor or assign it to my account, and when I enter the transaction, those values will default on the transaction. I can block a certain combination so that someone cannot select them, and I can also make it required that someone select a combination. So lots of ways to control that. Again, this is very important for the outcome of the data and how you're able to analyze the data. So you want to make sure it's a very important setup component, and we would work with you to make sure we set those up and we're able to record what you needed to see and be able to get the result that you wanted on your reporting. So next I'm going to go into a journal entry. I'm using my quick access here instead of the global search, lots of different ways to get to the data. I'm going to go into general journals and open up my demo batch. So I don't have any transactions in my batch right now, but just as it sounds like, this batch could hold multiple transactions, and I would be able to keep the batch open and just post new entries as I go. So I'm going to put in a transaction for prepaid insurance. I'm just entering a journal entry, but do note here that you can select specific document types on a general journal. It doesn't have to just be GL related. It can also be an entry for a customer or for a vendor, and it would do the same things that you would expect of the subledger. It would hit the customer ledger or the vendor ledger, the item ledger, but it would also update my general ledger accounts as well. So lots of things you can do in this general journal screen. Today, we're just going to enter a simple transaction for prepaid insurance. Would like to know, as you're entering the transaction, you can type in the account number if you know it. You just put in the natural account number, no segmentation yet. But I can also just type in a description, and it will pop up the items that match that filter and select the account that I want. You'll see there are many fields in here. I only am required to enter the fields that have a red asterisk next to them. but there's many different options in here and wanted to make sure that you're able to visualize them. On the accounts, I can specify different posting rules, and that's where you see these posting groups here. In this particular case, I'm just entering a journal entry. I'm designating which account it's going to. I don't need to select any rules, so I move on past those fields. Tax information here, this would make sense, especially if you were entering a customer transaction. I'm going to move past here because I'm not entering that type of a transaction. And here's where I put in my debit amount. Now, if I want to, I can go down to the next line and put in the credit side of the transaction, but I actually have this prepaid account set up with a balancing account to it. That's my checking account, the 10100 account. So what this means is I'm actually done with this entry. I can post it, and then it will have a debit to prepaid insurance and a credit to my checking account, just simply because of that balancing account that I defaulted in there. Lots of different options and ways to do that. Just a note here that my admin dimension was associated with my account, and that's why it defaulted here on the line. I can also add my customer group code if I wanted to as well. Those are the two dimensions that I had designated associated with that particular account. Since there are so many fields on the screen, but yet entering and I only had to fill in a few of them, I wanted to make sure you knew the possibility of personalizing the screen. Many customers do this to streamline the entry, knowing how they're going to use the screen, how they want the users of the role center to use the screen. So I can personalize my screen. What this does is gives me the ability to remove a field, simply hide it. I can also move where a field is positioned just by clicking move here and then dragging it to the location that I want. And I can also add fields here. If I want additional text fields, for example, I can press add field. It will give me a list of fields on the right-hand side that I can drag over and position where I want on the screen. So that comes in really handy so that you can not only secure the screen to just the fields that you want your users to use, but also so that you can just streamline your entry. So I'm going to click done with personalization. I'm now back to just the entry that I had. I'm going to go up to post and print. I can preview posting. That's an option in every screen. Before I post something, I can preview it, see what transactions it's going to create in the subledger, in the general ledger. I can also open and edit any transaction in Excel. So if I wanted to, if I was doing a large payroll entry, for example, and I had it in an Excel file, I could open this in Excel, paste in my payroll entry into that Excel file, and upload it into the system using that functionality. In this particular case, I'm going to go ahead and post. And it tells me that they were posted. If there was a problem, if I didn't have a matching debit and credit, for example, it would have given me an error message and allowed me to go in and fix the problem. So I'll just quickly hop out of here, go to my chart of accounts, and now for prepaid insurance, I now see an amount. I'm going to drill down into it. There is an entry here that I entered today, 526. And I can drill into this. I can go ahead and look at the entry. I can look at the dimensions that I associated with it. I can also, if I made a mistake, I can reverse the transaction. It will create the necessary reversing entry. I'll still have my audit trail. It doesn't delete anything, but it's just a quick and easy way here to see what you have on a particular account, drill down into the entries, drill down into the dimensions, and make any corrections that are needed. So that's a look at the journal entry. And then last part of GL that I wanted to touch on would be reporting. This is going to be somewhat similar to what Jason talked to you about. I have the ability to look at any of the out-of-the-box reports. I will search for the trial balance. And just to show you what the trial balance, what an out-of-the-box report looks like, I'll go ahead and print this one to the screen. Note that I have lots of options that I can toggle on and off, but I can also choose a particular account number that I want to filter by, and I'll do that for maybe not. Let's select at least one report column.
Toggle one of those.
Well, it's giving me all kinds of fits. I'm going to select a date filter. And there we go. And so this is a look at the trial balance report. I did a summary trial balance from this report or any out-of-the-box report. I can export to Excel. I can download to a PDF. I can set it up to send this report to a group of recipients, email recipients. So lots of different options with that. There's also a job scheduler that allows me to set up a job to send this report on any given time frame to a group of email recipients. And then the last piece that I wanted to show you in terms of out-of-the-box reports would be account schedules. These are your out-of-the-box financial statements. So the first section is our cash flow reports, and the last section are the balance sheet, the cash flow statement, and the income statement. We'll take a look at these. These are very similar to, I think, what you would see in Management Reporter. You set up your rows, you set up your columns, you identify which accounts are your totaling accounts, you identify what your formulas are, and then you print. So I'll show you the income statement. And I'll just do a time frame between end of the last year and today. And here it shows me my income statement by my sales, my expenses, and my net income. So all of these account schedules that you see with all those rows and columns, these come out of the box. Then you just simply go in and add your chart account numbers, your natural account numbers to them. You do have the ability to include dimensional reporting on these account schedules as well. On your home page, you can associate favorite accounts with your own profile so that you can quickly see any account that you want to keep daily tabs on, for example. You can drill down into those as well, see all the transactions that made up the balance. So it's just a quick way to check. You can also add your own Power BI reports and dashboards to the screen. And you can, I showed you the trial balance that I printed, but you can also set it up so that the trial balance just appears on your screen for analysis and drill down as well. And I think that takes us through all of the topics on the general ledger side in comparison with what Jason talked to you about for GP. So what we'll do is we'll switch back over to him. We're going to talk next about cash and bank.
Excellent. Thanks, Ann. Just give me 1 second here while I get my presentation brought back up. There we go. So again, I'm going more through screenshots in GP, and Ann will be doing the live demo, but we'll certainly move forward here and we'll talk a little bit about bank reconciliation. We'll talk about, setting up your different accounts in Dynamics GP, and we'll talk about the reconciliation process. So as most of you are probably familiar, if you're using cash management in GP, you can set up multiple bank accounts through the checkbook maintenance window in GP. Now, just because it says checkbook maintenance in GP doesn't mean it has to be a checkbook. It can be a savings account, it can be a loan, it can be different types of accounts you might have at your bank. But you set up those as master records in your system, and it automatically will create the subledger for you in GP to start doing things like recording your checkbook registry. Okay, so some of the things you would do in GP is you would give it a name, give it a description, and you would choose a currency if you're using multi-currency, and then you are going to associate a cash account to that specific checkbook ID. A cash account is your tie back to your general ledger. okay? There's some information in this window that you also define, like what's my next check number? What's my next deposit number? And those numbers are going to default onto your transactions and accounts payable and accounts receivable. You can record information about your individual bank that this account is held at. That information is going to be used for processing ACH in, ACH out, if you're doing direct deposit through payroll. The checkbook, again, going back to GP is an integrated solution, the checkbook itself will process and automate transactions with accounts payable, accounts receivable, with payroll, where if you cut a check out of AP, it updates the vendor record, the vendor account itself. It also updates that record into your checkbook ledger and into the general ledger, right? So it communicates unidirectionally, but into those different areas of GP. What it won't do, again, because it's not unidirectionally or bidirectionally, you can't create a transaction in checkbook maintenance and have it update back down to the to the accounts payable module. All right. On the right-hand side of this screen, it's just once I've created that Uptown Trust checkbook and I start processing transactions in my subledgers or directly into the bank itself, it starts building my ledger out for me, or my register of that subledger transactions. These transactions are what's used to reconcile back to the bank statement, okay? And that's going to be the next area that we talk about is how do we, once we create these checkbooks in GP, how do we maintain them? How do we reconcile them with the records at the bank? And that will be the next area is talking about bank reconciliation in GP. All right, bank reconciliation in GP out of the box, just core configuration, is a very manual process. You obtain your bank statement, whether it's downloaded and printed, or if you receive it in the mail, you download your bank statement, and then you begin the bank reconciliation process in GP by going into transactions, reconcile bank statement, copying the information from your bank statement, ending balance, and bank statement date, and putting that information into GP. And then you move in to start to match your transactions manually. So your bank statement will show you all the checks that you've processed. You would go in and you would find them in GP and you would mark them, clear them, clear them, clear them, deposits, checks, adjusting entries. You would manually clear all those. If there are any transactions on your bank statement that you haven't recorded yet in GP, as an example, a wire transfer fee. Or interest. Then you can go right into your adjustments button on the Select Bank Transactions window, and you can enter those transactions in to complete your reconciliation. Those adjustments will post back up to the general ledger as well when you reconcile. Once you've gone through the entire process and your difference in your bank reconciliation screen is 0, then you can click on the Reconcile button and lock down that reconciliation. That does several different things. It will lock down all of the information as of that reconciliation, so all of your outstanding transaction reports will be printable by that reconciliation identification number, and it will also lock down transactions and accounts payable to no longer be voidable because they've already cleared the bank, right? Some benefits about doing bank reconciliation in GP. There are some, again, out-of-the-box tools and ISV solutions out there that if your bank statement is a very long document, you can use Electronic Bank Reconcile in GP, where you download your bank statement as an Excel file or a CSV file. You do some mapping up front when you first configure the tool, but then what it will do is it will match the transactions from your CSV file or your Excel file. It will automatically clear them in this window for you. So it'll run a process. It will match up everything it can match, and it really speeds up that reconciliation process. An important part to know about bank reconciliation and GP altogether is you are not reconciling your general ledger at all in this process. You are reconciling your subledger to your bank statement. And so reconciling your subledger to your general ledger is a completely separate process. There are some tools out there, some ISV products that do allow you to reconcile your bank statement directly to your general ledger, and then it will also match everything through into your subledger, which will shorten that process. But out of the box, just talking about some of those core functionalities, the bank statement and the bank reconciliation is a very manual process. Okay? So that's, I mean, cash management in GP is pretty straightforward. There's not a lot of transaction entry windows. There's not a lot of additional processes you need to do in GP, but we definitely want to take a look and have Ann show us what this looks like in Business Central as well. So I'll hand it back over to you, Ann, and let you walk us through Business Central.
Okay. Thanks, Jason. I'm going to go ahead and show my screen again. And there are lots of, if I go to the cash management menu, you can see lots of different screens here. I'm going to focus in on bank accounts and bank account reconciliation so we can compare to GP. But I do want to mention quickly the cash flow piece. It's a really cool feature within cash management. It's the ability to set up forecasts of inflows and outflows of cash. You identify the accounts that you want to analyze, the accounts that you want to forecast for, and that should be included in the calculations. And then the system uses Azure AI to analyze the transactions that you have. It looks at the historical data, and it looks at any data that is currently in the system, and it generates a cash flow forecast for you. And that is a really interesting tool and really useful tool that you have that comes out of the box. So I'm going to go into bank accounts. This is a very simple place where you set up your accounts. You identify the number or the name, however you'd like to designate them, the description, and then the section here just talks about if it's linked or not. Linking is a piece of functionality that I think is different than what you would have with GP. You have the ability here to link this to a live account so that you can use a free tool that will give you an automatic feed of your transactions into Business Central. It's not posting them anywhere. It's simply pulling them into the cash account for reconciliation purposes. Since this is a live demo and Jason did not want me to use his bank account, I'm going to show you some other ways to do reconciliation without the live feed. I will say, though, that's mostly what our customers use to do their reconciliations is an auto feed, and you can then use that to do it on a daily reconciliation on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, however frequently you want using that feature. So I'll go to bank reconciliations. I'm going to select new, and I'm going to do a reconciliation for my checking account. So let's say I've received the statement in the mail, or possibly I've downloaded it from the bank, or I have my automatic feed set up. In addition, there's one last choice. I can import the bank statement. So if I have gone online and exported my bank statement for a particular period, it's now in a CSV format or an Excel format, for example, I can import it here. So what that would do is it would automatically pull in all the lines from my bank statement, or if I was using the feed, those bank lines would already be here. In this particular case, I'm going to do this in a more manual fashion. I'm going to enter in my statement date and statement ending balance, and I'm going to use the functionality in the system to suggest the lines that should be matched. And so what that's done is it's looked at everything that was already in my ledger that I've posted from various sources, maybe AR, maybe AP, and it's matched it up to what is on the bank statement. And I have the ability then to edit this as needed. So I can go through and say that I'd like to match this manually, that I'd like to remove the automatic match. I can also look at the match details and see what the bank account ledger entry was and what it was matched to. If I need to, I can enter in a bank fee or charge here and then just simply post this. Once I have the everything balanced down here, I post it and print my reconciliation, and I'm finished with that particular reconciliation. As I mentioned, you can do this as frequently or infrequently as you want, and if you do get behind, you can catch it up, whether you have the feed turned on or not. I think that's it in a nutshell for bank account and cash management in Business Central. So we will move back to GP for the moment.
Excellent. Thanks, Ann. Yeah, it looks like bank reconciliation is really simple in both products, but really starting to like like that process in Business Central. It's really cool. Excellent. Okay, let me get my screen shared here. Just give me 1 second. There we go. We should be back on. So we'll move forward and we'll take a look at accounts receivable. For the accounts receivable, when we do this similarities between the products, we'll be talking about customers, how we set up customers, how we manage customers. We'll be talking about transactions, and again, we'll be talking about reporting. And with GP, you're going to hear the cadence of reporting, right? It's going to be very similar across the board, but we'll touch on it and we'll highlight those again for the accounts receivable module. So in GPAR, we know, users of GP know cards are your master record sections, right? So there are a lot of different areas in GP that you can set up customer records depending on what your needs are going to be. So, looking at the screenshot right now, we're setting up just a basic customer record in Dynamics GP, the master record for Aaron Fitz Electrical, and that's just done on a basic customer card. Okay, so we can define things like, hey, what's the name of this customer? What's their short name? What's their statement name? Maybe they want a different name on their statements. What's their primary address ID? And you're not limited to the number of addresses you can record for your customer or transaction against once that's set up. So this Aaron Fitz Electric, they might have warehouses across multiple locations, and you might be shipping products to those multiple locations. That's okay. You can set up different address IDs per your customers. And then you can set up some defaults which expedite transaction entry. The ship to address, the bill to address, the statement to address, the salesperson ID who might be working with that customer primarily. What's the territory ID? The salesperson and territory ID help drive commissions if you're going to be calculating and paying out commissions in GP. Okay, there's some different information like account numbers, UPS zones, some logistical information. We have comment fields. We have some user-defined fields we can keep there. And then, on the bottom, we have some options to set up some default general ledger distribution accounts for the transactions. We have, buttons to set up some advanced options for customers like credit limits or placing customers on hold, removing holds, writing off documents, all sorts of different options we can set up to configure our individual customers. Then we have the email option, obviously, where we can set up to email customers documents directly out of GP through a number of different email providers, Exchange, any other MAPI servers, Google Mail, whatever you wanted to do there. So, in a nutshell, setting up customers is very similar to setting up accounts, setting up checkbooks, setting up vendors. We have that ability to set up those customer records in GP and default a lot of the information onto transaction entry windows. With GP setting up customers, we also have the ability to set up dynamic relationships like national accounts, where you may have a parent customer and the ability to set up child customers and then group their transactions together and roll them up to the parent account. So you might be issuing, transactions to each of the child accounts, but you're going to send one statement to the parent account. Okay. You can do things like set up customer-vendor relationships where you may have a customer that is also a vendor and you want to do consolidated invoicing. You want to take into consideration all the AR side and the AP side and either issue an invoice or issue a payment if they're a vendor. So just some of those quick dynamic things that we can set up in AR as far as customers go. For GP, the header on this one also says customers, but this will be talking about transaction entry. As many people using GP know, you have multiple ways to enter transactions into accounts receivable or sales order processing depending on what your needs are. If you are entering in basic invoicing transactions, meaning you're just going to record a sale and there's no integration to inventory, you just want to record an invoice, a credit memo, any of those document types, you can do so through transaction entry. All of the information in there is defaulting from the customer card. You basically have to select the document type, the document date, the customer number, then the value of the transactions. You can adjust your distributions to the general ledger at this point. You can post it on the flyer. You can save it to a batch and post it as a batch. If you need to do more detailed invoicing, you can use sales transaction entry, which gives you a lot of the same functionality with the addition of you can now tie your AR into your inventory module, and you can do line item detailed invoicing or line item detailed documentation, or if you want a full fulfillment process, you can do, order fulfillment, pick list, packing slips, things like that through the sales module in GP. So relatively high level on that, but here again, I'm assuming that our audience are GP users and they're probably familiar with this process. So we want to spend a little bit more time comparing some of these with what's in Business Central. And again, the reporting in Dynamics GP out of the box, your age trial balance reporting. There's a lot of different options for age trial balance reporting, and there's some transactional reporting as well. But Smart List, Excel refreshable reporting, SSRS for your reporting options out of GP from that subledger. So just as a high-level overview of some of those things, I'm going to hand it back over to Ann now, who's going to walk through some of those similar areas in Business Central so you can get a good look and feel of what are the similarities between the two systems.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and show my screen again. And we are going to talk about those same subjects. We're going to go this time to sales and customers and take a look at the customer partner. Got several customers set up here in my demo database. I'm going to open up Tree Research and show you the different, there's many different pieces of information that you can associate with a customer, whether it be for defaults or analysis purposes, calculation purposes. Here at the top, we assign a number. All numbers in the system can be associated with a number series so that the next sequential number is assigned to each new record. You can also override that if you want to control the numbering yourself. Generally, I recommend allowing the number series to control that to make sure that there are no duplicates or issues with alphabetical order. You can block a customer based on credit information, based on payment information, and you have the ability here to just quickly see the balance on that customer's account, balance due, and any costs associated with their sales. Address and contact information is here. Similar to GP, you can have unlimited ship-to addresses for a customer. These can be associated here. You can associate a default contact and a default ship-to with the customer record, and then on a transaction, it could change to something else depending on that particular transaction. Also similar to GP, you have the ability to associate accounts with a parent. So if you want to put a transaction against a child customer, but you want to bill the parent, you have the ability to select a parent customer here. You can do the same thing with the vendor-customer relationships too. You can associate a vendor contact with this customer so that you would be able to see a consolidated look at what that account is owed or owes you. Many different sections here or fields here for tax defaults, currency defaults, and information about payment terms and shipping information as well. On the right-hand side, you have a look at some quick facts about your customer. These tiles can be used to drill into the open transactions for the customer's orders, quotes, credit memos, returns, anything related to this customer's record, and then the ability to drill down into the customer's balance. You can see what's outstanding, what's shipped, not invoiced. You can see payments that have been made, last payment receipt date, and again, you can drill from these little hyperlinks directly into the transactions that make it up. Every customer can have a unlimited amount of notes assigned to them. You can put in web links and you can attach documents. That's just as simple as browsing out to your computer or your server and selecting a document that you want to attach. Up here in the ribbon, lots of ways to access information. So I could create directly from here, if I wanted to, a quote for this customer, a credit memo, a sales order. I could set up a workflow, lots of out-of-the-box workflows that I can use to create a workflow that would allow approval of any new customer records, for example. If I've created a new customer record, I can request approval here, and then the person set up as the approver would see on their homepage a queue to approve that. Each customer can have their own prices and discounts set up. You can also do that by item, in case you are wondering. And then here I can navigate very quickly to create a statement, see what's, if I notice this customer has a large past due balance, I can create a statement right here on the fly and email that out to the customer. I can schedule the statements to go out to this customer. And again, lots of different quick access to different things here that would be associated with this record. I'm going to show you how I would enter a invoice for a customer. I'm going to select my customer record, the same one that we were just looking at, and I'll let the information default for the most part. Down here, I can include an inventory item. This is my system is of course set up with inventory. That's why you're seeing that list of items available. But I have the ability for, if we're not using inventory, I have the ability to enter lots of different types of lines here. It could just simply be an entry to a GL account. I could choose a charge item, a service item, a fixed asset, so it does not have to be inventory related to enter this invoice. I'm going to enter my quantity. It defaults in my extended price because I selected an inventory item. And as you can see, I've already selected all of the red asterisk line fields, so I'm ready to post my transaction. Over here on the right-hand side, it gives me some quick information about the customer, but also the item that I've selected. How much do I have available? What does it cost? What is the profit percentage? So I could release this invoice, or I could go to post and new, post and send. If I want to email it to my customer, I could preview the posting to see what's going to happen. I'll go ahead and post the transaction, and it asks me if I want to view it in the posted invoice window, so I'll quickly take a look. All right, and so let's say some time has passed, and this customer has sent me a payment. I can go, there's lots of different ways to enter my payments. I could do a general journal. I could have an automatic feed set up. I could just come in here and register customer payments. It will show me all customers out there with open invoices. And I'll come down to here to this one that I just posted. Say that they made payment. It will default in today's date. It'll default in the amount open on the invoice. I can change that if they've made a partial payment. And I can type in their check number or whatever external reference number that I have, and then post that payment. You'll see up here I can post just simply the payment I've entered, but I also, if I've entered lots of payments here in the screen, I can post it as a lump sum. Still going to update each individual customer, still going to update each individual GL account, but it would, on the bank side, it would post as a lump sum deposit amount. So I'll post that payment. And then I know we want to move on quickly to accounts payable, so I'll just mention that we have the ability to print customer statements by customer, but we can also do it in a batch. We have the ability to set up payment reminders for each of our customers. That would mean the ability to look at their terms, the ability to look at their past payment date, their past payment history, and send them reminders. And the reminders can be associated with a finance charge if they do not hit the date that we request in the reminder. Those are all automated, and those are all emailed to the customers, so that that works with that Outlook integration seamlessly, so that you set it up once and you don't worry about it again. Your statements and reminders can go out on an automatic basis. So that's accounts receivable. We're going to switch back to Jason to talk about accounts payable, and that's where we'll finish up our modules today.
Excellent. Excellent. Thanks, Ann. And we'll move through this just to make sure we're respecting time. We know we're a little short on time on this one, so we'll just jump through it. And again, our audience today is GP users, so you guys are probably familiar with this information, right? In Dynamics GP, we have the ability, just like in AR, to set up our vendor information. On our vendor cards, we set up a lot of default information that's going to default onto our transactions. Things like we can do a unique vendor ID sequencing, alphanumeric, to keep our vendors organized, and we can record addresses, default account numbers that that will default on those transactions. And then with emailing as well, you can set up each individual vendor if you want to email documents like POs or remittance forms. All that information. You can record things like 1099 details. So if it's a 1099 vendor and you want to use GP to print your 1099s and distribute those to your vendors at the end of the year, that all can be configured up in Dynamics GP as well. And then just like in AR, you have that customer-vendor relationship that you can set up from the vendor side to relate that back to a customer. Okay. AP transactions in the transaction listing of the purchasing module, very similar to the sales side, where it's segregated to purchase order processing to accounts payable or payables management. So purchase order processing, which you can, if you pay attention, there's a nice little gap between purchase order generator and transaction entry. Everything above that is going to be purchase order processing. That's the three-phase: write a PO, receive the goods and services, and receive an invoice and match the invoice. So it's that three-part match. Everything below that line is going to be your basic accounts payable. So if you just have basic purchases that aren't line item detailed, you can open up that transaction entry window, choose your vendor, enter in that document number, put in your purchase amount, document things like trade discount, freight, miscellaneous charges, and taxation, and then post those transactions to the vendor's account. This is also the area where you can build payment batches, print your checks, or generate your EFT files that you'll send to your bank to pay your vendors electronically. So a lot of information, a lot of options to do transactions in GP, but it's definitely selecting the right transaction entry point for all of those individual transactions. And reporting, iteration, right? So it's the H-Draw balance reporting, a lot of different options in GP, Smart List, Excel refreshable reports, and those SSRS reports. And I don't have it on here as well, just because it's not kind of an out-of-the-box functionality, but Power BI can be connected in with Dynamics GP as well. I think it integrates a little bit better with Business Central, but you can connect things like Power BI and some other reporting tools directly to your SQL data. So just wanted to throw that out there. And just to respect time, I'm going to hand it right back over to Ann, who's going to wrap us up with what does that look like in Business Central as well.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for letting me have the last words. So I think what you'll find is that the vendor's card actually has pretty similar information to GP. It's organized differently and maybe has a few more links, quick links to access information. But again, like the customer, you've got your number, your description, and then all kinds of data that you may need in terms of the operation side of the house, address, unlimited contact information, the ability to associate tax information, posting transaction detail, and then your payment terms. So you might see on here that there are there's an intercompany or an IC setup. There is a lot of details here where you can do froms between entities within Business Central. Down here in the payment section, then you identify some of those defaults as well if you're using multiple entities. And then here is where, for if you're receiving goods, how you tell the system how those are going to be put away for this particular vendor. Same thing as we had with customers, a link to the statistics, a link to all the tiles and the drill downs that will take us to those open transactions for the vendor. And then up here, the ability to quickly navigate to different things that are associated with this vendor, their contacts, their bank accounts, prices that you have lined up with this vendor, and the ability to quickly create transactions for this vendor, purchase orders, and returns and orders. So I'm going to show you how to enter a purchase invoice. Let's say we're not doing the three-step process, the purchase order to receipt to invoice. We're just going to go right to the invoice in this scenario. I would select my vendor. I would enter in the invoice number for the vendor. That's a required field. And I would select the item that I had ordered, how much, and the rest of the information defaults. So any tax information, and in other related information, pricing information is defaulting from the item card since I selected an item here. I can request approval on this if I want to, or I can just simply post it, and it tells me that it's posted, and I can drill right into the posted invoice. Also pretty similar to what you saw on the GP side is the ability to do all different types of payment types for your vendors. So I can do a computer check. I can do that as a batch. I can also do manual checks. I can do electronic funds transfer. I can do ACH wire, all types of different options. It has the ability to link up with your banks so that you can generate an electronic file, get that validated by the bank, and you may want to use electronic payments more for your vendors. There are still many customers doing checks, and that's what I'm going to show you here. So I'm going to suggest vendor payments. I've gone into my batch. What I want the system to do is go out and look at some information that I've got out there for my vendors. Let's say I've got some vendors that I could potentially take some discounts for. It will allow me to select any vendors that have a priority. It will allow me to select vendors that I haven't paid in the last 60 days. So that's what all these options are for here. Identify the last time I've paid vendors. I can say that I want to select a specific vendor here, filter by a specific payment term, lots of different options. So I'm going to just select every possibility and see what gets selected and suggested for me to pay. So these are all the vendors out there that I haven't paid since that 2/21 date that showed up in the screen. What I would do here is say I'm doing computer checks. I would just come over here. It shows me which invoice is outstanding. It shows me the amount, and I would just simply need to type in the payment method. So I will choose check. And I would go down through each vendor, identify the payment method, change the amount if I'm doing a partial payment, for example, and then I would post this. Now, since these are checks, I would need to print them before I could finish the posting, and the system would automatically mark off that they were printed. So many different options in terms of payments. And I would say the reporting is very similar as well. I have an age to AP report that I can print. I have a vendor trial balance report, and you're going to find a lot of similarities there in terms of how you can access the data. You can also build your own Power BI dashboards to do purchasing analysis or vendor analysis, but I think the out-of-the-box reports are very sufficient in terms of the day-to-day information that you'd want to see. I think that takes us to the end of the high-level stuff that we wanted to show, and I will turn it over to Zach to close us out.
Thank you, Ann. Before we end the webinar, I'd just like to open up the floor to any questions that attendees might have, so we will give them a few seconds to type their questions into the chat.
Excellent.
Just give them a few more seconds. All right, I think everyone must have pretty much had their answers or their questions answered during the presentation. Just so everyone knows, I will be sharing this recording out with everybody who attended, along with contact information at Turnkey. Oh wait, hold on, we had a second question come in.
Excellent.
Pull this up. Okay, so I can expand this. Okay. Okay, so do you have the option to create positive pay and upload files to banks?
Yeah, speaking from the GP side, yep, positive pay can be done in a number of different ways. There is a safe pay tool in GP as well, but yeah, you can load up a file of the payments that you've made, send them to your bank, and clear them for clearing, at your bank as well. So.
Yes, and then same for Business Central. You have you don't need a separate tool or anything. Positive pay and safe pay are out of the box functionality in BC that we can set up and then coordinate with your bank to initiate. Once it's set up, then it continues to be part of every payment transaction that you do.
Good question.
Looks like we actually have another one as well.
Good.
Can you touch on integrations with third-party tools such as MICR?
Such as what? I want to make sure we address it if it's a specific one.
It's MICR is.
Oh, Maker. Yep. So yeah, I mean, I'm assuming that's coming from a GP resource. As you know, McCormick Maker installs within Dynamics GP and gives you several abilities of printing to a Maker-enabled check. You can configure the actual Maker encoding on the check, and it also adds some automatic check signatures and security over those automatic signatures. So I'll let Ann open up just to talk about if McCormick Maker is integrated with Business Central.
Yeah, actually, you don't need a separate tool like McCormick for Business Central. Maker is an out-of-the-box feature that you can turn on. You just have to configure it, obviously, and it sometimes takes one or two iterations with the bank to make sure that the font and the line are matched up. So it's usually a matter of creating a test, send the file to the bank. They will send back any feedback, make adjustments, send it back again, and they'll confirm that the alignment is correct, and we can then have that print on our checks.
That's awesome. I did not know that.
And then another one here. How about AP document management tools or DocLink or other experience managed tools like Concur?
So from the Business Central side, you have the ability, of course, to attach documents to your vendor record or to any transaction that you're entering in the system. So if you entered a purchase order and then matched up the invoice to it and you wanted to link those documents, you can do that. And it will be, attached in the database. You'll be able to then access that attachment if you were drilling down. If you need something more robust, you want something that's more file structured, you can use add-on products for document management. And if you're referring to automation, AP automation, the ability to, for example, read in a vendor's invoice and train the system to put the data in the right place and automatically load it into the system. It has that functionality as well as several third-party products that can be used for OCR and AP automation. I think there was a second part to that question. It was, what was the second part to that, Zach?
It was expense management tools such as Concur.
Oh, yeah. So used all the time by our customers. Concur is a popular one. Integrations are relatively straightforward with Business Central just because of the open APIs, but also because of the platform that it's on. The Dataverse platform has the ability to do all kinds of integrations, and Concur, like I said, is a popular one. There are also other tools out there that people are using. Gorilla Expense Management, for example, is one that I've seen a lot recently, and it has some of those products have BC connectors out of the box, so you just simply make the connection, you do your expense management in Gorilla, for example, and then the connector brings the related data over into Business Central for any processing or payments that need to be made, reimbursements that need to be made out of the BC side.
Okay, and I think we have one last one here. Do you have a list of third AP automation products, I'm guessing third party, that work well with BC using OCR and AP invoice integration?
Yes, I don't have the list handy, but can certainly share that with you, Zach, so that you can follow up with that.
Okay, yeah, I can include that in our follow-up information.
Okay.
Okay, actually we do have one more, I believe, and it just is BC only a cloud solution.
BC can be deployed on premise. So BC is essentially Dynamics Nav in the cloud. That was how it was originally released about 5 years ago. So initially it was cloud only. In the years that followed that, an on-premise solution was also developed, and there are some clients that choose to deploy on-premise for various reasons. I would say the majority of our customers are in the cloud. It has its advantages certainly, but we would help you determine that on a case-by-case basis what made the most sense. Just one note about that is the majority of the ISV products for Business Central are now cloud ready. So there will be less choices in terms of ISV solutions for the on-premise deployment. The functionality, however, for Business Central is exactly the same between the two deployments. I guess one major difference is that you would not have the Azure AI functionality that you do in the cloud version. I mentioned that when I was talking about cash flow forecasting. And it's in some other areas as well, sales analysis, purchasing analysis, and Power BI. Those are all, they all have some components that are only going to be enabled on the cloud version.
All right, I think that covers it. As everyone, or as I mentioned before, this presentation will be sent out to everyone who attended the recording along with my contact information. So if you have any further questions, I get those questions over to Ann and or Jason as needed. So with that, Ann, Jason, I would like to thank you for your time and look forward to sharing this out.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care, everyone.